Well, good morning, friends. Hi, welcome. West Tennessee Dave here. It is 6:33 in the morning on Sunday. That is Central Time. Good to see you all. Hope you are having a great day. Thanks for being here this morning. And if you are coming later on a VOD, well, welcome to you as well. You're all welcome here. All right, what are we going to read today? I got to get my head in the game. It's been a little bit off. So here we go. Let's focus. We're going to read 2nd Chronicles 23 through 28. We are in the retelling of the story of the kings of Judah for the most part. And, yeah, so let's continue on where that story left off. We kind of had a cycle of kings, of some doing good, some doing bad. Let's see how it continues from here. In the 7th year of Ataliah's reign, Jehoiada, the priest, decided to act. Hello, good morning, Spacey. Hi, welcome. In the 7th year of Ataliah's reign, Jehoiada, the priest, decided to act. He summoned his courage and made a pact with 5 army commanders: Azariah, son of Jeroam, Ishmael, son of Jehohanan, Azariah, son of Obed, Messiah, son of Adiah, and Elisaphat, son of Zikri. These men traveled secretly throughout Judah and summoned the Levites and clan leaders in all the towns to come to Jerusalem. They all gathered at the temple of God, where they made a solemn pact with Joash, the young king. Jehoiada said to them, "Here is the king's son. The time has come for him to reign. The Lord has promised that a descendant of David will be our king. This is what you must do. When you priests and Levites come on duty on the Sabbath, a third of you will serve as gatekeepers. Another third will go over to the royal palace, and the final third will be at the foundation gate. Everyone else should stay in the courtyards of the Lord's temple. Remember, only the priests and Levites on duty may enter the temple of the Lord, for they are set apart as holy. The rest of the people must obey the Lord's instructions and stay outside. You Levites, form a bodyguard around the king and keep your weapons in hand. Kill anyone who tries to enter the temple. Stay with the king wherever he goes." So the Levites and all the people of Judah did everything as Jehoiada the priest ordered. The commanders took charge of the men reporting for duty that Sabbath, as well as those who were going off duty. Jehoiada the priest did not let anyone go home after their shift ended. Then Jehoiada supplied the commanders with the spears and large and small shields that had once belonged to King David and were stored in the temple of God. He stationed all the people around the king with their weapons ready. They formed a line from the south side of the temple around to the north side and all around the altar. Then Jehoiada and his sons brought out Joash, the king's son, placed the crown on his head, and presented him with a copy of God's law. They anointed him and proclaimed him king, and everyone shouted, "Long live the king!" When Ataliah heard the noise of the people running and shouts of praise to the king, she hurried to the Lord's temple to see what was happening. When she arrived, she saw the newly crowned king standing in his place of authority by the pillar at the temple entrance. The commanders and trumpeters were surrounding him, and people from all over the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Singers with musical instruments were leading the people in a great celebration. When Ataliah saw all this, she tore her clothes in despair and shouted, "Treason! Treason!" Then Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders who were in charge of the troops, "Take her to the soldiers in front of the temple and kill anyone who tries to rescue her." For the priest had said she must not be killed in the temple of the Lord. So they seized her and led her out to the entrance of the horse gate on the palace grounds, and they killed her there. Then Jehoiada made a covenant between himself and the king and the people that they would be the Lord's people. And all the people went over to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They demolished the altars and smashed the idols, and they killed Matan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. Jehoiada now put the priests and Levites in charge of the temple of the Lord, following all the directions given by David. He also commanded them to present burnt offerings to the Lord as prescribed by the law of Moses, and to sing and rejoice as David had instructed. He also stationed gatekeepers at the gates of the Lord's temple to keep out those who for any reason were ceremonially unclean. Then the commanders, nobles, rulers, and all the people of the land escorted the king from the temple of the Lord. They went through the upper gate and into the palace, and they seated the king on the royal throne. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was peaceful because Athaliah had been killed. Joash was 7 years old when he became king. He reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. His mother was Zibiah from Beersheba. Joash did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight throughout the lifetime of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada chose 2 wives for Joash, and he had sons and daughters. At one point, Joash decided to repair and restore the temple of the Lord. He summoned the priests and Levites and gave them these instructions. Go to all the towns of Judah and collect the required annual offerings, so that we can repair the temple of God. Do not delay. But the Levites did not act immediately. So the king called for Jehoiada the high priest and asked him, "Why haven't you demanded the Levites go out and collect the temple taxes from the towns of Judah and from Jerusalem?" Moses, the servant of the Lord, levied this tax on the community of Israel in order to maintain the tabernacle of the covenant. Over the years, the followers of wicked Athaliah had broken into the temple of God, and they had used all the dedicated things from the temple of the Lord to worship the images of Baal. So now the king ordered a chest to be made and set outside the gate leading to the temple of the Lord. Then a proclamation was sent throughout Judah and Jerusalem telling the people to bring the Lord the tax that Moses, the servant of God, had required of the Israelites in the wilderness. This pleased all the leaders and the people, and they gladly brought their money and filled the chest with it. Whenever the chest became full, the Levites would carry it to the king's officials. Then the court secretary and the officer of the high priest would come and empty the chest and take it back to the temple again. This went on day after day, and a large amount of money was collected. The king and Jehoiada gave the money to the construction supervisors, who hired masons and carpenters to restore the temple of the Lord. They also hired metal workers, who made articles of irons and bronze for the Lord's temple. The men in charge of the renovation worked hard and made steady progress. They restored the temple of God according to its original design and strengthened it. When all the repairs were finished, they brought the remaining money to the king and Jehoiada. It was used to make various articles for the temple of the Lord, articles for worship services and for burnt offerings, including ladles and other articles made of gold and silver. And the burnt offerings were sacrificed continually in the temple of the Lord during the lifetime of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada lived to a very old age, finally dying at 130. He was buried among the kings in the city of David, because he had done so much good in Israel for God and his temple. But after Jehoiada's death, the leaders of Judah came and bowed before King Joash and persuaded him to listen to their advice. They decided to abandon the temple of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and they worshipped Asherah poles and idols instead. Because of this sin, divine anger fell on Judah and Jerusalem. Yes, the Lord sent prophets to bring them back to him. The prophets warned them, but still the people would not listen. Then the Spirit of God came upon Zechariah, son of Jehoiada the priest. He stood before the people and said, "This is what God says. Why do you disobey the Lord's commands and keep yourselves from prospering? You have abandoned the Lord, and now he has abandoned you." Then the leaders plotted to kill Zechariah, and King Joash ordered that they stone him to death in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. Now, that was how King Joash repaid Jehoiada for his loyalty, by killing his son. Zechariah's last words as he died were, "May the Lord see what they are doing and avenge my death." In the spring of the year, the Aramean armies marched against Joash. They invaded Judah and Jerusalem and killed all the leaders of the nation. Then they sent all the plunder back to their king in Damascus. Although the Arameans attacked with only a small army, the Lord helped them conquer the much larger army of Judah. The people of Judah had abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, so judgment was carried out against Joash. The Arameans withdrew, leaving Joash severely wounded, but his own officials plotted to kill him for murdering the son of Jehoiada the priest. They assassinated him as he lay in bed. Then he was buried in the city of David, but not in the royal cemetery. The assassins were Josachar, the son of an Ammonite woman named Shimeath, and Jehozabad, the son of a Moabite woman named Shomer. The account of the sons of Joash, the prophecies about him, and the record of his restoration of the temple of God are written in the commentary on the books of the kings. His son Amaziah became the next king. Amaziah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother was Jehoiadin from Jerusalem. Amaziah did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, but not wholeheartedly. When Amaziah was well established as king, he executed the officials who assassinated his father. However, he did not kill the children of the assassins, for he obeyed the command of the Lord as written by Moses in the book of the law. Parents must not be put to death for the sins of their children, nor children for the sins of their parents. Those deserving to die must be put to death for their own crimes. Then Amaziah organized the army, assigning generals and captains for all Judah and Benjamin. He took a census and found that he had an army of 300,000 select troops, 25 years old and older, or 20 years old and older, all trained in the use of spear and shield. He also paid about 75,000 pounds of silver to hire 100,000 experienced fighting men from Israel. But a man of God came to him and said, "Your Majesty, do not hire from Israel, for the Lord is not with Israel. He will not help those people of Ephraim. If you let them go with your troops into battle, you will be defeated by the enemy, no matter how well you fight. God will overthrow you, for he has the power to help you or to trip you up." Amaziah asked the man of God, "But what about all the silver I paid to hire the army of Israel?" The man of God replied, "The Lord is able to give you much more than this." So Amaziah discharged the hired troops and sent them back to Ephraim. This made them very angry with Judah, and they returned home in great rage. Then Amaziah summoned his courage and led his army to the Valley of Salt, where they killed 10,000 Edomite troops from Seir. They captured another 10,000 and took them to the top of a cliff and threw them off, dashing them to pieces on the rocks below. Meanwhile, the hired troops that Amaziah had sent home raided several of the towns of Judah between Samaria and Beth Horon. They killed 3,000 people and carried off great quantities of plunder. When King Amaziah returned from slaughtering the Edomites, he brought with him idols taken from the people of Seir. He set them up as his own gods, bowed down in front of them, and offered sacrifices to them. This made the Lord very angry, and he sent a prophet to ask, "Why do you turn to gods who could not even save their own people from you?" But the king interrupted him and said, "Since when have I made you the king's counselor? Be quiet now before I have you killed." So the prophet stopped with his warning. "I know that God has determined to destroy you because you have done this and have refused to accept my counsel." After consulting with his advisors, King Amaziah of Judah sent this challenge to Israel's king, Jehoash, the son of Jehoaz and grandson of Jehu, "Come and meet me in battle." But King Jehoash of Israel replied to King Amaziah of Judah with the story. Out in the Lebanon mountains, a thistle sent a message to a mighty cedar tree, "Give your daughter in marriage to my son." But just then a wild animal of Lebanon came by and stepped on the thistle, crushing it. "You are saying, 'I have defeated Edom,' and you are very proud of it. But my advice is to stay at home. Why stir up trouble that will only bring disaster on you and the people of Judah?" But Amaziah refused to listen, for God was determined to destroy him for turning to the gods of Edom. So King Jehoash of Israel mobilized his army against King Amaziah of Judah. The two armies drew up their battle lines at Bethshemesh in Judah. Judah was routed by the army of Israel, and its army scattered and fled for home. King Jehoash of Israel captured Judah's king, Amaziah, son of Joash and grandson of Ahaziah, of Azahiah, at Bethshemesh. Then he brought him to Jerusalem, where he demolished 600 feet of Jerusalem's wall. From the Ephraim gate to the corner gate, he carried off all the gold and silver and all the articles from the temple of God that had been in the care of Obed-Edom. He also seized the treasures of the royal palace, along with hostages, and then returned to Samaria. King Amaziah of Judah lived for 15 years after the death of King Jehoash of Israel. The rest of the events in Amaziah's reign, from the beginning to the end, are recorded in the books of the kings of Judah and Israel. After Amaziah turned away from the Lord, there was a conspiracy against his life in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. But his enemies sent assassins after him, and they killed him there. They brought his body back on a horse, and he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. All the people of Judah had crowned Amaziah's 16-year-old son Uzziah as king in place of his father. After his father's death, Uzziah rebuilt the town of Elath and restored it to Judah. Uzziah was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 52 years. His mother was Jechaliah from Jerusalem. He did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight, just as his father Amaziah had done. Uzziah sought God during the days of Zechariah, who taught him to fear God. And as long as the king sought guidance from the Lord, God gave him success. Uzziah declared war on the Philistines and broke down the walls of Gath, Jabneh, and Ashdod. Then he built new towns in the Ashdod area and in other parts of Philistia. God helped him in his wars against the Philistines, his battles with the Arabs of Gur, and his wars with the Meunites. The Meunites paid annual tribute to him, and his fame spread even to Egypt, for he had become very powerful. Uzziah built fortified towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate, at the valley gate, and at the angle in the wall. He also constructed forts in the wilderness and dug many water cisterns, because he had kept great herds of livestock in the foothills of Judah and on the plains. He was also a man who loved the soil. He had many workers who cared for his farms and vineyards, both on the hillsides and in the fertile valleys. Uzziah had an army of well-trained warriors ready to march into battle, unit by unit. This army had been mustered and organized by Jael, the secretary of the army, and his assistant Mahasiah. They were under the direction of Hananiah, one of the king's officials. These regiments of mighty warriors were commanded by 2,600 clan leaders. The army consisted of 307,500 men, all elite troops. They were prepared to assist the king against any enemy. Uzziah provided the entire army with shields, spears, helmets, coats of mail, bows, and sling stones, and he built structures on the walls of Jerusalem, designed by experts to protect those who shot arrows and hurled large stones from the towers and the corners of the wall. His fame spread far and wide, for the Lord gave him marvelous help, and he became very powerful. But when he had become powerful, he also became proud, which led to his downfall. He sinned against the Lord his God by entering the sanctuary of the Lord's temple and personally burning incense on the incense altar. Azariah the high priest went in after him with 80 other priests of the Lord, all brave men. They confronted King Uzziah and said, "It is not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord. That is the work of the priests alone, the descendants of Aaron, who are set apart for this work. Get out of the sanctuary, for you have sinned. The Lord God will not honor you for this." Uzziah, who was holding an incense burner, became furious, but as he was standing there, raging at the priest before the incense altar in the Lord's temple, leprosy suddenly broke out on his forehead. When Azariah the high priest and all the other priests saw the leprosy, they rushed him out, and the king himself was eager to get out because the Lord had struck him. So King Uzziah had leprosy until the day he died. He lived in isolation in a separate house, for he was excluded from the temple of the Lord. His son Jotham was put in charge of the royal palace, and he governed the people of the land. The rest of the events of Uzziah's reign from beginning to end are recorded by the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz. When Uzziah died, he was buried with his ancestors. His grave was in a nearby field belonging to the kings, for the people said, "He had leprosy." And his son Jotham became the next king. Jotham was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. His mother was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. Jotham did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight. He did everything his father Uzziah had done, except that Jotham did not sin by entering the temple of the Lord. But the people continued in their corrupt ways. Jotham rebuilt the upper gate of the temple of the Lord. He also did extensive rebuilding on the wall at the hill of Ophel. He built towns in the hill country of Judah and constructed fortresses and towers in the wooded areas. Jotham went to war against the Ammonites and conquered them. Over the next 3 years, he received from them an annual tribute of 7,500 pounds of silver, 50,000 bushels of wheat, and 50,000 bushels of barley. King Jotham became powerful because he was careful to live in obedience to the Lord his God. The rest of the events in Jotham's reign, including all his wars and other activities, are recorded in the books of the kings of Israel and Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. When Jotham died, he was buried in the city of David, and his son Ahaz became the next king. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 16 years. He did not do what was pleasing in the sight of the Lord, as his ancestor David had done. Instead, he followed the example of the kings of Israel. He cast metal images for the worship of Baal. He offered sacrifices in the valley of Ben Hinnom, even sacrificing his own sons in the fire. In this way, he followed the detestable practices of the pagan nations the Lord had driven from the land ahead of the Israelites. He offered sacrifices and burnt incense at the pagan shrines and on the hills and under every green tree. Because of all this, the Lord his God allowed the king of Aram to defeat Ahaz and to exile a large number of his people to Damascus. The armies of the king of Israel also defeated Ahaz and inflicted many casualties on his army. In a single day, Pekah, son of Remaliah, Israel's king, killed 120,000 of Judah's troops, all of them experienced warriors, because they had abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors. Then Zikri, a warrior from Ephraim, killed Maaseiah, the king's son. Azrikam, the king's palace commander, and Elkanah, the king's second in command. The armies of Israel captured 200,000 women and children from Judah and seized tremendous amounts of plunder, which they took back to Samaria. But a prophet of the Lord named Obed was there in Samaria when the army of Israel returned home. He went out to meet them and said, "The Lord, the God of your ancestors, was angry with Judah and let you defeat them. But you have gone too far, killing them without mercy. And all heaven is disturbed. And now you are planning to make slaves of these people from Judah and Jerusalem. What about your own sins against the Lord your God? Listen to me and return these prisoners you have taken, for they are your own relatives. Watch out, because now the Lord's fierce anger has been turned against you." Then some of the leaders of Israel, Azariah son of Jehohanan, Berechiah son of Meshillemeth, Jehezekiah son of Shallum, and Amasa, son of Hadali, agreed with this and confronted the men returning from battle. You must not bring the prisoners here," they declared. "We cannot afford to add to our sins and guilt. Our guilt is already great, and the Lord's fierce anger is already turned against Israel." So the warriors released the prisoners and handed over the plunder in the sight of the leaders and all the people. Then the 4 men just mentioned by name came forward and distributed the clothes from the plunder to the prisoners who were naked. They provided clothing and sandals to wear, gave them enough food and drink, and dressed their wounds with olive oil. They put those who were weak on donkeys and took all the prisoners back to their own people in Jericho, the city of palms. Then they returned to Samaria. At that time, King Ahaz of Judah asked the king of Assyria for help. The armies of Edom had again invaded Judah and taken captives. And the Philistines had raided towns located in the foothills of Judah and in the Negev of Judah. They had already captured and occupied Beth-Shemesh, Aijalon, Gederoth, Succoth, and the villages, Timnah with its villages, and Gimzo with its villages. The Lord was humbling Judah because of King Ahaz of Judah, for he had encouraged his people to sin and had been utterly unfaithful to the Lord. So when King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria arrived, he attacked Ahaz instead of helping him. Ahaz took valuable items from the Lord's temple, the royal palace, and from the homes of his officials, and gave them to the king of Assyria as tribute. But this did not help him. Even during this time of trouble, King Ahaz continued to reject the Lord. He offered sacrifices to the gods of Damascus who had defeated him, where he said, "Since these gods helped the kings of Aram, they will help me too if I sacrifice to them." But instead they led to his ruin and the ruin of all of Judah. The king took the various articles from the temple of God and broke them into pieces. He shut the door of the Lord's temple so that no one could worship there, and he set up altars to the pagan gods in every corner of Jerusalem. He made pagan shrines in all the towns of Judah for offering sacrifices to other gods. In this way he aroused the anger of the Lord, the God of his ancestors. The rest of the events of Ahaz's reign and everything he did from beginning to end are recorded in the books of the kings of Judah and Israel. When Ahaz died, he was buried in Jerusalem, but not in the royal cemetery of the kings of Judah. Then his son Hezekiah became the next king. Okay, and that's where we're going to stop today. Oh man. It just ends on such a bad note there. So it starts with Jehoiada the priest at the beginning. If we remember from our last reading on Friday, Joash was this little baby boy, and Athaliah was the mother of the previous king. And when he died, she basically killed all of his children except for Joash. She didn't know that Joash was alive or that maybe he even had this baby. And she killed basically all of his sons so that she could rule and reign over Judah. And I mean, this is a very common practice in historical records of any kingdom, if you will, that generally, if you want control of the kingdom, you basically have to kill off the family lines. But anyways, Jehoiada the priest was given this baby and took care of it. And when he was 8 years old, which was like the minimum age that there was needed to be the ruler, he went ahead and started the process and got anointed Joash to be the king. And can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine being a king at 8 years old? I mean, I have a kid that's going to turn 8 this month. He's not ready to rule and reign a kingdom. Okay? I'll just be honest, right? I mean, he can get himself dressed. He's a smart kid and all, but he's not ready to rule a kingdom at 8 years old. And I don't know any 8-year-old that's really ready to rule a kingdom. And so a lot of what's happening is going to be done by advisors at this time, and Jehoiada the priest is kind of advising him. And you see that as long as Jehoiada the priest was living and Joash was following him, things went well for him. Now, Jehoiada lived a long time. He was probably pretty old when Joash came into his custody at the temple of the Lord. And you see Joash making all these plans to help the temple of the Lord. But as soon as Jehoiada dies, he just turns his back, right? He follows other advisors. And I mean, unfortunately, this is just so common in life. We have good advisors for seasons of our lives, and then no matter what, like the more powerful you get, the more influence you have in life, the more that people that want power are going to come around you, and generally these people don't have the greatest intentions. And they are going to be selfish and trying to get their own ways, and eventually Joash, who was 8 years old, so like he probably doesn't even understand it, became king. He's been king, he's been ruling well according to the ways of the Lord, but now the advisor he used to listen to is dead, so other people come and fill that space. And that space doesn't seem to line up, but he's like, okay, like I've always just listened to other advisors, right? And at some point, you have to learn, like, we have to learn the difference between good advice and bad advice. And just because you become more powerful and you're doing things well, like that more powerful and more wealthy people start to come around you, because that's what happens. Like, you know, you become wealthy, you become great. Other people that are wealthy and think that they're great come around you. The problem is, like, there's often this like competition between greatness and wealth and they want to like upstage themselves and do things and prove that they have it. One of the things that we see throughout this story and all these stories is God is always humbling the people to trust him. And the kings that trust him do well. And the kings that say, "Oh man, we have come a long way. We have established ourselves. We have done this on our own." Like they just go off the rails. They start worshiping other gods. They set up these things and it's like, I mean, how can you be so like back and forth? How can you be so back and forth? And the reality is we have to ask ourselves the same question. How can we be so back and forth? Right? You can worship God one day. You might go to church or whatever, or maybe you grew up one way, you worship God, and then the next like season of life you just don't care about God. In fact, you're bowing down and worshiping other like things that are just made by humans, right? And what does that look like today? You bow down and worship your iPhone. You bow down and worship you know, influencers or something like that. And it's like, why are you ascribing to be like that? You want to just follow God. Stay humble enough in your life and follow God. I know that's a hard call to make, but you just see what happens here at the end. You see kings do well, and then all of a sudden, like they're like, "Oh, you know what? I don't have the power of the Levites. The Levites aren't the rulers, but they're the priestly people." So this one king's like, "I'll just go in and do the duties of the Levites. I'll burn an incense altar." It's like, where do we get this idea that we have to have everything? That everything has to be available to us? It's okay that others have some power and responsibility, and it's okay to just trust others. It's a humbling process. It's a humbling process. For me, like I am a DIY person, honestly. I like to do as much as I can myself. I like to learn from it, but there are things that I just can't do. Like when it comes to medical things, I'm an idiot. Okay? Not only am I an idiot, I can't stomach like even medical talk sometimes. Okay? So there's no reason for me to think, "Oh, well, I should just go in there and start doing surgery on somebody." Like I have no business doing it. And it's like prideful to think, "Oh, well, I've seen a couple TikTok videos of people doing this and like now I'm an expert." No, I'm no expert. I don't need to be anywhere near a scalpel or anything like that. Um, it's okay to rely on other people, right? This is the concept of what is being built in these people is that, look, we're a people group together. The Levites have their role, the kings have their role, the people have their role, and we all need to live in harmony with one another for it to go well. When we start just trying to usurp and take over responsibilities of other people, um, it's just it's just not gonna work. Yeah, no TikTok surgery, right? Like, uh, it's just not gonna work. Okay, and we just see this happening though. Like we see this happening today with people like, "Oh, I watched this TikTok video, and so now I'm gonna do this because I'm an expert at it." Well, you've watched a person do it. You haven't gone through the procedures maybe that they did to get there. You also don't know how much video editing they've done to get whatever that they made in that video come to pass, right? And it's fine. Like, you see a TikTok video, you see a person dancing, you're like, "Oh," and then you mimic the dancing, fine, right? But you have to work on it. You can't just like, "Oh, I see it one time and I'm an expert. I can do that. No problem." Right? You still have to work on it, right? Um, but why do I bring that up? it's just cool to just say, you know what? That person did a great job. They entertained me for a moment. Great. Like, I don't have to become a pure copycat of them, right? Do what brings life to you and to others around you. And don't just try to steal the thunder of somebody else, because like they're not going to like it, right? And then what happens? Like then you go to war over these things that are just silly because it's like you just couldn't be content with what you had. And so in the same way, when we have God, right? And then other people start worshiping other gods, like are we jealous that they're serving other gods, that we want to take those gods and then also worship them? Because what God says is he's jealous. He doesn't want us worshiping him and other gods. Okay? And the best example of this, always, and I've said this before, maybe to you guys, but is marriage. Right? Like if you're married to a spouse and you're like, "Oh, I love my spouse. I'm dedicated to them. They're they're great, they're wonderful, like we're in partnership and union together." And then all of a sudden, you're like, well, this person could be a great spouse too. I'll just like I'm jealous of what that person has. I'm going to go steal the spouse of that person even though I already have my own. Like what do you think is going to happen? How is this going to end well? Who's going to be happy about that situation in this day and age? But that's what the people are doing here when they start worshiping God and then they start taking idols from other people and worshiping them as well, and thinking that that's okay. Well, that just doesn't work, right? Doesn't work in a marriage, and it surely doesn't work with God. He's like, you can't worship me and some other god. Like, I'm the only one. Those are just pretend. They don't do anything, and you defeated them. Why are you gonna worship something you defeated? I don't know. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But our lives are not much different, and we can really idolize a lot of the things in this world, whether it's success, whether it's money, whether it's fame. We can idolize that. We can look at somebody else's life and see that and say, yes, that's what I need. I'm going to bow down and do everything in my power to get that. That is idol worship of today. And it's very commonplace. And it's very common to just be jealous and want that in our own hearts. And that's the place we have to be careful of. Because as you can see, what does it lead to? It leads to us falling away from trusting God, doing things on our own, and not being able to humble ourselves and repent and say, man, I've gotten off track, God. I've gotten off track. Right? If you can't say I've gotten off track, like you've become very either committed to God, like no matter what, or you're just maybe lying to yourself. Because there's so much that distracts us in this world. There's so many idols that want to take us away from worshiping God. And it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to be committed to a process. But you have to be committed to God. Because your relationship is just like the marriage. So you got to be committed in the same way if you want it to be well with you and God. And then we work together towards repairing and making our relationship grow and grow stronger. And that's what we see in the rebuilding of the temple over and over again, and making it better, and making the reform, saying, look, I'm going to put stuff in place to show how committed I am with words and actions, and I'm going to put stuff in place to repair what has been destroyed through time, so that we can hopefully stay on a solid foundation. That's what these stories are trying to show us. And so as we go forth from here today, we want to be reminded to stay committed, because we can't worship two different things. We have to be committed. Otherwise, you get what you get here. And we're getting towards the end of this story, the retelling of the story of the kings here. We've already done it once. We're going to do it again. At the end of this story of the kings is the end of the kingdoms of Judah. They rebel too much. And Ahaz here was not a good king because, again, we've talked about this over and over again. The thing that matters most when God said somebody was a good king or a wicked king was whether they tried to give the people and themselves, basically, if they dedicated themselves to helping the people worship God. And Ahaz set up all kinds of stuff to worship other gods. So this was not what God wants, right? He can't have it, but you can't have it both ways. All right. So let's be wholehearted and committed to our process, and yeah, that's where we're going to go for today. So thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it. Don't worry, I'm not going to become a surgeon. It's not really on the table for me. I don't have the skill set for it. The only thing I can do is if somebody needs something, I can say, I'll pray for you and then go see the doctor, because I have no other wisdom for you. Put you in the hands of somebody that has some capableness in that matter. Yeah, I mean, basically that's what it is, right? Stay in your lane, right? Stay in your lane where you've been where you have been gifted by God and where you have expertise, right? If you want to get in another lane, that's fine, but study and become studied. Like, it's a process. But you can't just take it over. I can't just kill the doctor and say, well, I'm the doctor now. That's not going to go well for anyone else. I do know first aid. Like, I'm a scout, right? Yeah, first aid kit. I can do some scout stuff. Yeah, you can't destroy what was there before and then come in and pretend like you're the expert now. Like, that's just not how it works. So there you go. You're trained in mental health first aid. There you go. And mental health is a great thing, right? Like, there are things I know about that, and it's great. You're about a billionth in line. If you're a billionth, I'm a zillionth, okay? I'm a zillionth. As I tell the kids when I teach first aid to the Cub Scouts, right? Because they all talk about like crazy things. I let the kids be kids, and I'm like, there's first response. That's what first aid is. Like, simple things that you can do, right? Check on the person. You can maybe put a Band-Aid on somebody, okay? Sometimes if you're out in the woods, we'll learn to make splints or something like that, okay? But if somebody is having like a heart attack, or you need to do CPR, like, first of all, you're not trained. You're not trained in first aid, and I call it, you need more aid, which means go get somebody else, right? First aid means you can do something simple, and the next part is go get more aid, right? Somebody gets a bee sting, you can put a little alcohol on it. You can do a couple things to help them. Like, you have some ointment, you can help and put a Band-Aid on it, but go get some more aid. That's the best thing you can do. All right? Yeah. They all want to know about the tourniquet, right? They're like, what happens if we chop off our leg? I'm like, you're going to need more aid, okay? You guys probably can't tie it not tight enough to cut off the blood supply, okay? You need more aid. That's what that's what EMS is for, right? The first date is for simple things. And you're the first person there, you do your best, but sometimes you just have to get more aid. And that's okay. Like, it's a humbleness process. Anyways. All right. That said, I will be back with you guys later tonight, I believe. I got somebody had tagged me in a post on X, and I got a entry into the Gold Million tonight from on Coin Poker, so I'm excited about that. Hopefully, I'll get home from church and get to play that. I'll get started a little bit late, but we'll see if I can spin that stack up when I get home. Looking forward to that. I don't know if I'll stream that or not. It's kind of earlier than I normally go, but we'll see what happens. And then we should be back on Monday evening for study stream. So, and we'll be back here Tuesday morning for the next Bible story time. So until then, guys, have a great day. Stay in your lane, and I'll see you guys soon.